Hey everybody, Mav Hunter here. Well, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon on my 8th day of hunting Arizona over-the-counter archery mule deer. And tonight I'm set up on the edge of this brush line, which leads toward some feeding fields in the distance there, several hundred yards away. And we got 4 or 5 good trails on this field's edge here going out. They've been crossing this field and feeding in the field that's 2 over. But they've been crossing right through here is what I've observed the last few nights. So I'm set up in a natural blind. I've got the predator doe decoy out there to my left about 30 yards, and it's set up on a trekking pole. And I've got my Montana Miss Mule decoy set up a little behind me at about 2 o'clock, and that's set at 40 yards away, because sometimes the deer come out behind me here, and I'm hoping that the Miss Mule gets their attention, brings them over into my shooting range. So we're all set, we're in place, the wind is in my face, it's coming from the north. Let's see if a little magic can happen for the old Mav. Okay everybody, stay tuned. Showing you an inside the blind view. Here's my setup, day 5. Bingo, power shooting lane. Arrow knocked, the bow is ready to go. And out there at 40 yards, you can see my Montana Miss Mule deer decoy, and you can see the predator doe decoy installed on a trekking stick with cordage and a tent stake. You can't get a broadside look at them because I've turned them broadside toward each end of the field where the deer, I think, will come out. So we're kind of looking straight on. So being two-dimensional, we're seeing the third dimension, which doesn't show, which is a straight on look. All right, I'm set up, the wind is good. Got about 2 hours until magic time. And you can see there's my decoys, Miss Muley and the predator decoy, set up on a trekking pole with a tent stake and cordage to hold it against the wind. Going and using every trick in my bag these next couple of days. Hey everybody, Mav Hunter here. Well, I'm set up here on this agri field on the back edge, and it's 4 o'clock. No deer so far, but I did see a coyote. He came to about 100 yards. I was trying to get him on film, and he saw me move when I reached to hit record on the video camera, so away he went. But anyway, we'll see what happens within the next 2 hours. Alrighty. A group of does and fawns moved in here about an hour and a half later, intent on feeding in this field. They're only about 15 to 25 yards away, but I know this time of year I don't want to spook these does, because when you've got does in front of you, sometimes it's only a matter of a few minutes before a big buck might show up. And here I am coming into my setup. I've got my camo netting in place. That'll break up my outline a bit so I can move with my hands down below to operate the camera or access my bow and get ready for a shot. Again, using a trekking pole with some cordage to help secure the netting. As a side view of my, let's say, somewhat natural blind. There's my bow on the bow stand and my chair. Then we walk down here about 15-20 yards. And there it is. I've got my Montana Miss Mule doe decoy, which I've used before in several videos. And then I have a new decoy I'm trying out. And this decoy is the Predator doe decoy. It's designed to fit on your bow or hang from a tree limb. But in this case, I have a trekking pole that's attached to it, backed up by a little manzanita tree that's holding it up in this wind. So that's my setup for this evening. It's about 3 p.m. now. So hopefully in a couple hours, hopefully 2.5 hours, the deer that have been showing up in this part of the field might be drawn to the decoys along with my grunt tube and also my rattling antlers. You can see from my setup, I've had this spot in mind for about 5 days. I've spotted deer in this agri field, including a big buck, a big 4x4, not including its eye guards. So it's a 4x4 or 5x5 if you count them all. But he's been coming out in this field with his does, but the wind's never been right. And today the wind switched from a northwest wind, the wind switched to a southwest wind. So the one disadvantage I have is the sun is in my face. So even with a face covering, it's pretty bright. So I'm gonna have to put my hoodie on over as well. And right now, if a buck walked out there in this full sun, it'd be tough. I'd be squinting to make a shot. So I hope that if that buck comes out and presents a shot, I hope it's when the sun is setting. And then it won't impact my vision so much with the pins. So anyway, I've got the 2 decoys out, the new Predator Stalker doe decoy set up on a trekking pole. I've got my good old Montana Miss Mule doe decoy, which I've featured in several other videos. I've got my rattling antlers and my grunt tube and a perfect wind. So let's see if some magic can happen for the old Mav tonight. This group of does moved out. Once again, they're very close to my blind. They're anywhere from 15 to 45 yards away. There's another 4 deer down to my left out of the camera angle. And with those deer is a nice little 4x4 buck. The past few nights, these deer have been going to the next field over past that hedgerow in the background. But they're not going over there tonight because there's 2 other hunters set up on the next field over, and they're about 500 yards away. But their wind is blowing right toward these deer. So these deer are doing something they haven't done the last 3 nights. They're feeding right in this field in front of my blind, where I expected that these deer would move through this field into the next field, which is much more lush with feed than this one. But the deer started going over there, and they reached that middle grassy area, and they turned around and came back. And it's because they smelled the wind and the scent of those other 2 hunters. I heard some noises back to my right behind me as I was watching the other group of deer. And 20 feet away, these deer here came out of a deer trail 20 feet from my blind and circled around to in front of me. And now they're working their way to that group of deer that I was watching earlier. The 2 hunters are still 600 yards away, but in the setting sun, one of them has no face covering and he has no gloves, and it looks like 3 light bulbs in the distance. But they're holding still and they're blowing their deer calls, but these deer are paying it no mind because they know those hunters are down there. They can smell them. The wind is carrying their scent right my way. And I guess they were smoking a little something funny too, because I could scent that in the wind about an hour earlier when they set up over there. I was moving my camera to change the battery, so I took it off the tripod, and all of a sudden, from the other side of that brush line in the background, these 2 deer came bouncing through there out into my field. And I looked up and I saw the other 2 hunters with only 10 minutes of shooting light left. They're walking on out, back out to the dirt road and to their parked vehicles. So they pushed these deer from that edge right over into my field. And this deer became known as Big Spiky. And Big Spiky's intent on chasing this doe here. And she must be a hot doe because he's ignoring the other 2 does that also came across that field that those 2 hunters spooked. Big Spiky, he's doing his thing. I talked to several hunters over the next few days, and all of them were trying to get a shot at this Big Spiky. Most of them were searching for their first buck, so I can't blame them for that. But I've got this buck now at 25 yards, and it's definitely not what I'm looking for. So I've only got a few minutes light left. Doesn't look like the big buck's coming out tonight because the wind was all wrong with those other 2 hunters. They were essentially blowing my setup with their scent blowing toward me, along with the scent of their marijuana they were smoking. So we'll just sit quiet here and watch these deer disappear back into the brush.